friends! Welcome back to Stage Right. I'm your host, Sierra Haynes. My goal is to bring you along on a journey inside the minds and lives of some of Canada's most exciting playwrights. I have picked 5 playwrights that I'm curious to speak with, and then those playwrights will get to pick other writers that they want to get curious with. Whatever you're doing, we've got a story for you. This is Stage Right. I'm so glad to be back with you and share my next guest. The first time I ever saw Christine Quintana was on stage at Carmen Aguirre's show Anywhere But Here in February 2020, just before the pandemic hit. I had won tickets to the show and was feeling like $1,000,000 when the universe conspired to cancel my evening rehearsals at school with the classic Vancouver snowstorm. There are air quotes around the words snowstorm. Later on, she stepped in to give us students a business workshop about the do's and don'ts of creating a career in the arts. Christine was so open and fun, I jumped at the chance to have a chat with her again. Born in Los Angeles to a Mexican-American father and a Dutch-British-Canadian mother, Christine is now a grateful visitor to the unceded lands of the Musqueam, Squamish, and Tsleil-Waututh people. Christine is an actor, playwright, and co-artistic producer of Delinquent Theatre and current interim artistic director at New World Theatre. In these various capacities, she has worked with theaters across the country, and her work has been nominated for the Governor-General's Award. She has won and been nominated for Jesse Richardson and Dora Maver Awards. Her writing has been translated and performed in Spanish, French, ASL, and German. Her newest show, Espejos Clean, just received a rolling world premiere. We also discussed being a Shakespeare and musical theater nerd, pandemic art, and what it means to gather. She sounds very impressive because she is, but mostly I'm impressed that she's such a genuine, kind, and dedicated person. I can't wait for you all to meet her. It's time for a synopsis. Espejos Clean. The lives of 2 women from very different worlds collide in the illusionary paradise of a Mexican resort. Adriana, a hotel floor manager reeling from a family loss, has a chance encounter with Sarah, a Canadian wedding guest with a long-held traumatic secret. When their worlds collide on a fateful rainy night, both women are forced to face their past and all that they've tried to keep hidden. Stunning, shocking, and surprisingly funny, Espejos Clean intimately explores different perspectives of female solidarity, secrets, and survival across 2 languages. Performed in English and Spanish with dynamic subtitles. Someone Like You. A boyfriend from hell, a nightmare apartment, a botched Tinder date. Isabel and Kristen have been through a lot together. But the arrival of Kristen's new romantic interest leaves Isabel wondering how long she can stay in a supporting role. This new comedy launches Cyrano de Bergerac into the 21st century, mistaken identities, millennial manifestos, and the quest for self-love. Who might be waiting in the wings? A silver commission from the Arts Club Theatre Company. Good things to do. A solo performance for one via a unique, custom-built digital platform. For one, it's all a little too much. All right, thank you so much, Christine Quintana, for sitting down with me today for Stage Right. I'm so excited to chat with you.
Oh my gosh, my pleasure.
You have just come back from a huge experience with one of your newest shows. Do you want to tell me about it?
Yeah, and I feel like I'm still kind of in it, which is just wild. My play Clean Espejos, which I've been working on for a couple years, just had what we call a rolling world premiere, which I think just means it kind of premiered twice. So we opened with New World Theatre in Vancouver at the Cultch, and then they toured to Kamloops at Western Canada Theatre. And then 2 weeks later, it premiered at South Coast Repertory in Orange County.
Wow.
Yeah. So I had a really bananas couple weeks because I did the first 2 weeks in Vancouver with New World and then went to Orange County to do the first 2 weeks with South Coast. Then I came back for tech and opening here at home and then went back for tech and opening there. Yeah.
So you're really racking up your frequent flyer miles.
Yeah,
then.
which I mean, I have ethical questions about given the climate crisis that we're in and having a small footprint for a couple of years and now having a footprint growing and going, oh my God, what am I doing? But that's a whole other can of worms.
Totally. How is the experience working on the same show but twice in like you know, with two different companies.
It was
two different sets of actors, directors, probably. Like, what was that like?
I feel like I learned a lot. Like, I feel like because I started with New World, I fixed so many small things that are like little script things that if you just do readings, you never realize are staging problems. Like certain lines that kind of left one character like in a bathing suit for like a third of the play, which we were like, that's not necessary. So just adding a line about changing or like prop tracking and like things like that. But then at the same time, then going to South Coast where there was a different kind of production concept, different set and everything, and having some of
how different?
Oh, they were really different.
Were they different?
They were really different. Like the Cultch production is meant for the Cultch, which is, you know, 200-seat theater, very intimate. And at South Coast, we were playing in a much bigger theater, kind of more closer to 400 seats and like more height and like scale and depth. And so some of the intimacy that the Vancouver production was built around wasn't a possibility in the bigger theater. And so everything from the performance style to the set and everything was different. So I feel like I learned as well how much maybe plays are tailored for the premiere production, include everything from stage directions to other things. And so it was really cool to have a double world premiere and test like what are the choices that I want no matter what the staging is. So yeah.
Mm-hmm. Wow, that is such a neat experience. I'm so excited to talk with you right after it's happened because it's so
totally
unique.
Yeah, no, it's a feels like a once in a lifetime thing. Yeah.
How did you come across, what was your inspiration for this show? Because not only is it a show in English, but it's actually in two languages. It's in Spanish and English. So was that always part of the show, or did that happen as you started to write it?
Yeah, very, very early on. So I'm Mexican American on my dad's side and British Dutch white settler on my mom's side. And I didn't learn Spanish when I was younger. I'm still learning now. And I wrote the whole thing in English and then very quickly was like, okay, the character Adriana is a Mexican woman living and working in Mexico. Like she's going to be speaking Spanish for sure. And so I took some time to get the support that I needed and to write a grant for translation. And I had met Paula Zelaya Cervantes at UBC because we both went to UBC at the same time. And she's just an amazing playwright, director, just theater powerhouse in Mexico City. And I had seen her play The Orb Weaver at the Vancouver Fringe Festival, and it was absolutely beautiful. So I knew she was an incredible artist. And we got to talking and saw we were very aligned creatively and, you know, aesthetically and politically. So I asked her if she would sign on, and luckily she said yes. And so we spent it's been about 2 years now, I think, working on the translation together. And it's a translation and adaptation. So because, you know, I've never lived in Latin America, there's certain cultural and just practical details that Paula addressed in her translation. Like I would never have expected, like there's one part where somebody, I wrote in my original script, I wrote that she knocks on the door, and the conversation was like, actually there would be a gate with a doorbell that you would ring, and then someone would get you at the gate and let you in, like things like that. So it's now I ring the doorbell instead. Just to get the depth of like, it's more than just a translation, that it's making sure that the character really is, I mean, authentic is such a loaded word, but that level of detail and cultural specificity is present, so that the character feels really fully realized and really real. Yeah.
And how was it to see your work interpreted by two different sets of actors back to back?
Oh my gosh, it was such a thrill. You know, Genevieve Fleming and Alexandra Lanfiesta, who did it in Vancouver, have been with the piece between 1 and 3 years. So they really know the characters and they really know the piece, and they also know me really well. And Nell Geislinger and Lorena Martinez were looking at it fairly fresh. They did a reading last year, but kind of came into it in a different way. And it's really a thrill to be like, just to see different interpretations that are really valid. The characterizations were quite different, but totally held water. And it was so cool to be like, oh, this works. Like this works, and there's enough space for interpretation in this, which is kind of a relief.
No, and I've always found it amazing to see what happens when my words come out of someone else's mouth. And so to have that twice over with two different sets of collaborations, that's really interesting. Yeah. So this show, it got helped by so many different organizations: BC Arts Council, Tarragon, Banff Center, Playwrights Lab, New World, South Coast Repertory. Like, what's it like working with all these different organizations to make a show?
It's such a gift. I feel so lucky. And then there's just a lot of facets to it. So I got funding through the BC Arts Council for my kind of first kick at it. And then Canada Council came through because I applied for the translation and for dramaturgy. I worked with Daniela Atienza, who also co-directed the Vancouver production. And then I kind of used like every opportunity I had. So like I was already going to be in residence at Tarragon, and I ended up writing the play unexpectedly while I was at Tarragon, and then just used my residency time there. I had access to some space. I got to do a reading there, and then I applied for the Banff Center to kind of start working on the translation and multilingual aspect of it. And then South Coast Rep, I became involved with last year for the Pacific Playwrights Festival and did a reading there. And it's interesting, right? Because it's amazing. Yeah, I also like did a workshop with New World Theatre, and Aluna Theatre was involved with the podcast that we made and the subtitle, everything. So it's amazing to have that much support, and also a challenge as an artist to just really know what you want and what you want to say, and that everybody will bring their own lens to it or their own interest to it, and have things directions that they think it should go, or and to stay really clear on what your values are and what your artistic vision is, while letting in kind of the wisdom of all those different people. And it also, to me, just goes to show what it takes to get a premiere play like properly developed and launched, which is a lot. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of resources.
Totally. I could tell, and it's been so fun to watch along from the sidelines on Instagram, whatever I've been noticing come from your account or from even Alexandra's account, because we did a show together in the fall. So I've gotten to work with her and just see it bubble up and come together. It's been really fun for me. So you said, I'm just kind of like circling back to something that you said briefly, that you started writing this show kind of by accident. How's that happen?
Yeah, I have family members that worked in the resort industry in Cancun, and a couple years ago, one of them won a like door prize at a staff party, which was a trip for two to the resort where they worked. And so they invited me, and I went, and it was such a weird experience because like I like came in with them through the staff entrance, but then I stayed as a guest, and I kept having this kind of behind the scenes, but then staying as a guest, and all of the luxury and kind of weird feeling of I don't know, the sort of artificial
because you know everything that's going on behind the doors, right?
Yeah, and there's like intersections of race and class and nationality that all kind of collide there. And it's beautiful. It's like beautiful. There's swim up bars and beautiful pools and loungers and amazing lunches and all this kind of stuff. And then like leaving the resort and visiting my family's homes and like actually seeing, real regular life. And it was a weird trip and very difficult, and that kind of feeling I kept having sort of reminded me of disassociation and how that relates to trauma. And then a couple of ideas that I'd been kind of wrestling with sort of formed into characters in that setting. And so I wrote the play within a couple weeks of coming back to Canada after that trip.
I mean, it must have been difficult, but also inspiring to have gone there if you wrote it that fast.
Yeah, it was a very potent time and place. And just a lot of tension between various things there. And it's interesting because like I've never been to a resort. I'd never been on like a real vacation before.
Me
yeah.
neither.
And I think it's so interesting, and especially in the arts, like because I think people in the arts community tend to skew from, more upper class backgrounds. A lot of people are like, oh yeah, my family goes to, Cancun every year. I'm like, interesting. Okay. I think something that's interesting about Clean Espejos is that when you hear the pitch of what it's about, that it's about, a Mexican woman who works at a resort and a Canadian woman who's there as a guest, you go like, okay, I know what this is going to be. But it's not that. It's actually a really personal, really zoomed in story about two women who are trauma survivors. But the big picture of it, of kind of, the sort of cultural and literal imperialism of Canada and the United States on Mexico and everywhere else, lends itself to a lot of allegory, that's for sure. Even like we got to do an interview with Dr. Cristina Omecha, she's a professor, and she studies basically the anthropology of like tourism on the Yucatan Peninsula. So like how the massive presence of the resort industry and all these American-owned companies is affecting like literally the like social anthropology of the region. And she was telling us, amongst many things, about how local, like people who live in Cancun and the area, have super limited access to the beaches, because all of the access is owned by the resorts. And even though it is actually Mexican law that the beachfront is accessible to everyone, it's like you have to go through a resort to get to it. So it's not actually accessible. And so people have been...
You can't just go there.
No, you can't just walk through the resort,
Yeah.
But there's been a lot of advocacy and a lot of protesting and a lot of work done to open up access to your own beaches. So like, there's just so...
I guess that's something I've never thought about. I've never been to a resort, so it's really not on my radar, but I never would have thought about that.
Oh, yeah, and you go on the website and they're all like exclusive, like beach resort, like private access, and it's like, actually that's public property. That resorts do many number of things to intimidate locals from actually being able to access the land that they live on, which is, something that might be very familiar to Canadians. So, yeah.
Yes. We have our own version of that here. I remember somewhat similar, but also different. Some of my neighbors, they have a house in Arizona, and they were kind enough to let us go down there a Christmas. And then we were going into like a JCPenney or something, and there was this bag that was like glitzed out, and this little boy was holding it, and his mom was next to him, and he goes, "Look, Mom, this is the kind of bag a Canadian could own."
Whoa.
Because they see Canadians owning so much property around them.
Yeah, right.
And it was a really interesting interpretation of, I guess, my version of privilege in their space that I never expected.
Yeah, there's a line in the play, we have so much to some and so little to others. Because I wanted to, with this piece as well, to kind of push, like the character Adriana is actually like a middle-class Mexican who it's very unusual that she's working at the resort. She's actually defying her family and that she's left her home for reasons. Because, the narrative that people have, they're thinking like made in Manhattan, like they're thinking... the whole thing is dominated by the stereotype of the like Mexican immigrant woman who's working in housekeeping in the United States or in Canada, which is both a stereotype and a reality that's a lot more complex than what it gets airtime in mainstream media. And, you know, I wanted to do some work to kind of subvert that and add detail and add context that she's actually got this entire life behind her. And that it's not, you know, it's not, in this case, it's not an immigration story at all because it takes place in Mexico and she's a Mexican character.
Right.
And that Sarah is the visitor. It's been a heavy responsibility to create this piece and to know, in the dearth of responsible Latinx representation in Canadian theater, to be really careful about what I'm adding to it. But yeah, that idea of like, we have so much to some and so little to others is that we make so many assumptions about each other, and we make so many assumptions about what we know about somebody's life, when in fact we know very little. And the whole point of the piece is to go deeper into two people who you might look at and dismiss on the surface.
Right. There's a scene in the play that has no translation. Are English audiences ever meant to understand that?
No.
Yeah.
Okay. So the whole play is in English and Spanish. Adriana speaks Spanish with English subtitles, and Sarah speaks English with Spanish subtitles. And by the time we get to that scene, you have been watching these women for an hour and a half. And the idea behind it is to kind of thrust you into their position where if you are Sarah and you don't speak any Spanish, that if Adriana is not speaking English with you, then all you can do is listen to her, watch her body language, use your intuitive understanding. And as an audience member, you know, if you don't speak Spanish in that last scene, you should know. You should know. Yeah. And my experience getting to see it with audiences in Vancouver and in Orange County is that people get the gist. They get the idea. Oh, so the other night I watched, sidebar, I watched Drive My Car.
Please.
Did you see it?
Okay.
It's it was one of the Best Picture nominees. And I'd seen Rodrigo from Shakespeare in the Ruins had been posting about it on Twitter like so much. So I was like, okay, I got to see this. And in it, there's like a bunch of things, but they have this amazing, it's about a theater artist. He's a theater director. He's directing a production of Uncle Vanya. And it's a Japanese film. And in the play, they're working with artists speaking Japanese, Korean, Mandarin, and Korean Sign Language. And you watch them rehearse it where they learn the rhythm of the piece, but they might be doing a scene where one actor is performing in Japanese and the other one is performing in Mandarin, and neither of them speak that other language, but they're learning the play and they know what the line is and just what the boundaries of communication and language are, and listening and deeper listening. And then of course I, an English speaker, am watching the whole film with subtitles as well. And was thinking about how like I can read Spanish, and so I know that the translation is fully accurate to, like, Paula's translation of Clean Espejos is fully accurate to my intentions, to the rhythm, to the character's voice, and it's also completely different because it's in Spanish. It's in a different language that necessarily has different syntax, different ways of expressing things, different rhythms. And then when we put the surtitles up, sometimes we can't fit the whole thing. You couldn't read fast enough. So we edit it further. Right. So I think about that, and then I'm watching this film thinking, looking at the subtitles, thinking like, what am I missing? But to also know that everything I'm missing, I just need to watch the actors and see their eyes and their breath and their emotion. And so I feel like at that point in the play of Clean Espejos, you've been watching them for an hour and a half. You know everything about these women. You've been watching, they've been in direct relationship with you for that long. And then we pan out and you're watching them from the outside, and you're watching them come up against the boundaries of both of their languages. And hopefully you get a sense of like the full depth of life experience that we don't get if we just take each other just on face value by words or whatever. And that there's a whole complexity and fullness of life that we all carry around with us that we couldn't possibly convey to somebody else. And so I hope that through any frustration or anxiety or excitement, and like, again, like that scene privileges bilingual people, which many people, you know, many people in Canada and the United States are English as an additional language to one or more languages that they speak. And so I always love that the people in the audience who speak English and Spanish are like living their best lives in that moment, you know.
You do feel special.
Absolutely.
Whenever there's a French moment that comes on, you're like, oh yeah, like in my own two languages. It's fun.
Exactly. And so, yeah, just to let that be as complicated as it is. Yeah.
Could you elaborate on the title of the show for me?
Yes. And you know, it's funny. I actually am changing the title.
You heard it here first, everyone.
Absolutely. It all happened so fast. And it's not that dramatic, but it's actually going to be, right now it is written as clean/espejos. But moving forward, it's going to be espejos : clean.
Okay.
And so clean was the English title that I gave it right away. And because it has all these different resonances in English, which is like something to be literally clean, but something like clean slate, clean conscience, cleaning out my closet, like all of those kind of resonances. But because Spanish just functions differently, it just hit different in Spanish because if it's an adjective, then it's gendered based on what it's talking about. It has to be conjugated a certain way. It can be an order. Like there's all sorts of different things it could be. And we were kind of always like, And then as I was fretting about it, we asked the incredible group of cultural ambassadors that we worked with at New World Theatre. So we worked with a group of women who we connected with through Kiwasa Neighborhood House in East Van, who are all Latinas from different countries in Latin America and who all have been in Canada for a various number of years, some for a long time, some fairly recent. And they were amazing. They helped with some dramaturgy. They helped feedback on marketing and other things. And so I brought this to them. And one of the ladies was like, well, my favorite TV show is called Money Heist in English, but it's called, I think it's Casa de Papel, House of Paper in Spanish. She was like, those are just different titles. And I was like, oh. And then from that discussion came espejos, which means mirrors, which actually is an equal image through the whole show. And so there's like mirrors, looking at yourself, knowing that when you look in a mirror, you never see people the way that you never see yourself the way other people see you.
The way, yeah.
Finding your reflection in other people, projecting your reflection on other people, mirrored circumstances and mirrored patterns that repeat in your life. Like it had all the depth that we wanted it to. And so I also love that the Spanish and English titles are different because it gives you that little hint that like there is no such thing as like a direct, perfect translation, that there is subjectivity and interpretation in those things. And so to set that up right from the title feels really good. And then I swapped it because I wanted to put the Spanish first. And I also think espejos clean sounds really nice.
And then what was the change with the slash versus the semicolon?
Slash, I mean, I feel like it more directly implied that was the same. That was a translation. And in fact, so there was one other thing that we did at New World was we commissioned critical responses from people in Canada, the US, and in Mexico to read the play and just kind of offer their thoughts. So we had, I think, 6 women and non-binary writers read the play and just respond to how it hit them, what questions they had, what it brought up for them. And Georgina Escobar, who's a amazing playwright, Mexican, and she's Mexican and she's American, as she's a dual citizen and feels very much like she's from both worlds. Her essay had an amazing byline or subtitle, which was the hardest thing to clean is the mirror. And I was like, that's in so many ways what the play is about. And so espejos : clean kind of sounds like checking it off the list. And that's something that I feel really resonates. And I'm really excited. And I tried Googling it. And if you Google clean espejos or espejos clean, you still get all the good old Google data. Okay. So it's not gonna erase the
It's not gonna hurt you. That's good. It's something you have to think about now.
Oh yeah.
Hey?
The old Google cache.
That's so interesting. Well, I'm glad. I'm going to now start referring to it the new way. That's very fun.
Oh my gosh, this is breaking news. It started here.
Yeah, I know. I love it. I get this scoop. So let's just shift away from shows for a bit and let's just talk about you. What was your first experience in theater like?
Oh my gosh.
What was that first experience?
I kind of had my theater awakening was around age 8. I went to see, I think my school, which I'm such an East Van girl. I actually lived 2 blocks from the school that I went to at that time. We went to see Midsummer Night's Dream at Bard on the Beach. And I was like, that's it. Thank you. That's it. That's it for me. And it's funny, I actually, a couple years ago, I was sure, I was like, I know Alessandro Giuliani was in it. I remember it. I remember him. And I was like, that doesn't seem, how would I know? How would I have retained that? And I went and I Googled the cast list and I was like, I freaking remember everybody. I remember Sarah Mae Redmond was Helena, because I always wanted to play Helena, and then I grew up to be 5'3", so I'm like, well, that's off the table. I think Scott Bellis was in it. Yeah, all of these people who are my colleagues and friends now, it was completely imprinted. And then also when I was in school, we watched a VHS of the 10th anniversary concert of Les Mis, and I was like, aha, that's it. But then I was all in with Shakespeare and musicals at first. So I would, this is how deep nerdy and dedicated I was. I would go down to the Vancouver Public Library and I would take out musical theater cast recording CDs. And then I would go listen to them over and over until I could learn everything. So I learned I trained my voice by being I'm going to listen to the Les Mis soundtrack until I can sing all of Cosette's notes and I can belt all of Eponine's notes. And then I moved to Phantom of the Opera and was like, okay,
right.
Now I'm going to train my coloratura. I can't imagine what it was like for my parents. Sorry about that. And then just nerded out deeply on Shakespeare. And I'm one of those people who, when someone's vaguely quotes a thing, I'll be like, oh yeah, that's from this one. Here's the rest of the speech if you want.
What was it about Shakespeare that really got you?
I mean, it's the language. There's no way around it, which I think is so interesting considering truly, even as someone who knows a lot of the historical context and knows a lot of the words, and I have my, crystal Shakespeare's words dictionary, still half the time I'm like, what the fuck is this? But it's just the beauty of it, just, and the, including I've done a lot of work wrestling deeply with what business do we have doing Shakespeare? I mean, we don't even have to get into the racism, the misogyny, the anti-Semitism, the ableism, all of those things that are baked into the canon that, don't need to be reproduced along with the plays, but are just by knee-jerk reaction because of a lack of critical thinking about, what these things are saying. but that I think that there's power in reimagining those narratives because they're dominant cultural narratives. And that, the resources that those companies have, like Bard on the Beach, Stratford, all of the Shakespeare festivals, there's multiple Shakespeare festivals in every province. That those resources exist and they can be leveraged and redirected in certain ways. And I'm not even going to wade into the should we still do Shakespeare?
Yeah, that's a whole other discussion.
But one thing, I've been really off the deep end in the last couple of years. My dad passed away right after I wrote Clean.
Sorry for your loss.
Thank you. And there's a lot in the play that is very much about that, and I think it's kind of, one of those things. I wrote the play, and my dad died 2 months later, and the play is about a woman whose dad dies. And I was like, I must have known. I think that art has this power to tap into this intuitive depth that we have that I think a lot of us don't have access to in our daily life. But I went back and I read Hamlet again, which is such a cliche. I felt like such a ding dong. I went and sat on the beach and read Hamlet because I was like, my father just died. But I was like, damn, the meditations on grief and the desire for justice from things that there can be no justice, the fear of something after death, etc. It still hits so strongly, and I have gone back and read it again in regards to sort of madness and what is the nature of madness and releasing ourselves from time and place in a certain way, and it's all contained in there. And so you're like, I guess this is an eternal banger. There's it just is what it is, and it doesn't have to be the only one, and it doesn't have to be the cultural standard, but that still stays with me. Even though I've never actually gotten to do a Shakespeare, that's also where I start to really feel like a loser. I haven't actually done a Shakespeare yet, but
you love it so
but
much.
I do. I just might be more super fan at this point than anything else, but
that's allowed. You're allowed to be a super fan.
Yeah, well, and that stayed with me. So, and even though my theater tastes and aesthetics have changed, those two things, I think music and text, that's the foundation, and that's what my Shakespeare musical start gave me.
And so when you're seeking out stories, obviously Shakespeare, or even when you watch TV, when you're taking anything, what kind of work are you drawn to now?
I feel like right now I'm really interested in form. I feel like if someone's going to put a naturalist drama on stage right now, they better have a really good reason. They better have something. They better be ready to show their notes, because I feel like at this point in this part of the world, realism, naturalism that we were all so obsessed with in the 2000s, it's done. I feel like after the previous American president, after a pandemic shutting down the world, naturalism, what is that? What is natural anymore? Nothing.
Right.
So I'm interested in really things that are really doing something with form in a certain way and with audience relationship. And I feel like, one of the big things that came out for me creatively during the pandemic, is what is performance? What is liveness? What is the act of gathering for something? Including, everyone who was like, digital theater is not theater. I'm like, well, why not though? Literally, why not? Explain. And so I think in everything, I'm looking for things that have a strong relationship to form and just a strong point of view. Some of the things that I've loved recently are things that are not afraid to grapple with the moment that we're in, like Station 11. Did you watch that?
I'm going to write it down. I've been reading a lot of plays
Yes.
recently.
Well, Station 11 is both a book and a TV show.
Okay.
But what it does with memory and form and storytelling and what it has to say, another big shout out to Hamlet in that one too. What it has to say about survival and what's the point of survival. I think right now when there's like, of course you got to have, the Gilded Age on HBO, which is like perhaps the most pointless thing I've ever seen, and I'm still watching it.
Don't you just love all the people in there?
Yes, I mean it's just like the Broadway retirement, or off season. Yeah. It's great. I love it. I'm happy for them. Does it have a point of view? No. Does it do anything fun with form? Absolutely not. But the things that really get under your skin right now, I think, are the things that are going to hold space and help us decode this sort of massive change that we're going through and are certainly I think only on the precipice of really understanding.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit more about the idea of gathering for theater? You skimmed the thought, and I just want to know more about your thoughts about that.
Yeah, I mean, I think about the work that I made over the pandemic where with some of my friends, I had created this piece called Good Things to Do, which used to be an installation piece. And then we converted it into a digital theater piece and it worked super, super well.
Oh, I
you did that. I remember that.
Yeah. That was fun.
So that was all about reaching people in a really intimate way. Just through their screen. And that, no spoilers, but what happens at the end, it matters that you're all there,
Yeah, I sat my whole family down. We actually all did it together.
Oh, that makes me want to cry. That's so beautiful. Another thing that I did with actually the same group of friends, because, when you had your bubble, you were like, okay.
Yeah. What are we doing?
Did this project called the Quarantets. We had formed this little quartet vocal group, and we had just learned some songs and we're going to our friends' houses and singing for them, outside their window or on their porch. Aww. And what we ended up doing was for the whole year last year, at every solstice, at every turning of the season, we created a 15-minute piece that was a short story that was kind of about the changing of the season and about whatever the kind of COVID moment was. We never talked about that, but the winter one was about how to get through the darkest night of the year. And then we went to people's houses. They were all nominated by people that they knew. And we asked people to nominate just somebody who really needed a little special something. And it was sometimes people who lived alone or people that we would show up and very quickly you'd get the sense that, this is a family that's really going through it right now for whatever reason. And we would go sing for them for 15 minutes outside their home. And it was usually a surprise. And all the neighbors would come out or people would stop.
That's so wonderful.
And, we would just stand together for 15 minutes and play music and tell them a story. Simple as that. And it was such a pure exchange. And we didn't charge or anything. And people would come running out of their house after, be like, wait, and have a bottle of wine or some cookies, or somebody pulled the flowers out of the vase on their kitchen table and gave it to us because they were just we're exchanging something.
Right.
And so going back to that really, basic, beautiful exchange between performer and audience made me really rooted me back into the power of that, not to be so myopic about my own, what I want to say as an artist and how I'm pushing the art form, blah, 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 but what am I offering? And so it's also been really powerful with Clean Espejos or Espejos Clean, that it's intentionally designed for an audience not to all have the same experience, because the primary design in the past has made a lot of assumptions. Theater that's made for one audience, I'm making air quotes right now, really makes a great deal of assumptions about who that one audience is. And so to be in a space where there's active tension in the space of who's laughing when, who's listening and who's reading the subtitles in, the kind of climax, which is very polarizing and very intense, who's identifying more with who and how do you feel that? And that actually creates a charge within the audience because we are each other's community. That's, as simple as that. And certainly when you all decide to sit down together for 2 hours or what have you, you are in community with each other. And to let that electricity be generative and something that can power what we're doing moving forward, especially now that we don't take for granted what it means to literally breathe together and literally share air together. Yeah.
I think this is a great place to start talking about your piece, Someone Like You, because it's an audio show, right?
Yeah. So a couple years ago and before the pandemic, Ashley Corcoran and Stephen Drover had approached me about writing a commission for the Arts Club, and they wanted an adaptation of Cyrano de Bergerac. And that wouldn't have been something I would have gravitated towards necessarily, but I gave it some thought, and then I pitched them something that I felt passionate about. And we were like, great, okay, we'll start in September, as in like September 2020. And then by the time that rolled around, they're like, okay, so we're changing directions. How would you feel about writing it as an audio play?
So it was going to be for stage. It was going to be for stage.
Okay. And I was like, yeah, I'm into it. But I was like, I'm not going to write just a play that we'll record. Like, I really want to write it for, as I was saying, for the form, right? What are the things that we can do that you couldn't do or wouldn't be as appealing on stage or easy to stage? And so it was a really fast process. Like, I think I wrote the whole thing in like 3 months, which is like not my usual thing. And we recorded like not too long after that. But it was fun. It was great I was like, what do people need right now? And I was like, I want to write a rom-com that features people that aren't usually the stars of a rom-com. And that's going to make you just feel good and be kind of cheesy, give you some nostalgia and just make you laugh and just make you feel amazing and still kind of sneak in some point of view and some things to say within it. So it was really fun. I've never written like a straight up comedy. Like I refer to a lot of my plays as bleak comedies because they're like really funny until they're like super, super sad. But Ashley had asked me about this because I used to be really active on Twitter, and she was like, you're so funny on Twitter. And I was like, you're reading that? Oh no. I was like, I have to go back and like scrub my Twitter feed. Like, what stupid stuff was I joking about on Twitter? Just me always, being nervous about stuff and just tweeting about my low self-confidence. I was like, oh no. I didn't think any artistic directors were reading my Twitter. But it was so fun. And so my next challenge is I'm going to be adapting it back to a stage play.
Oh, yeah. Really? Okay. Wow. So I think this is like the first time that I was reading something or taking part of anything that had been made during COVID that referenced COVID that didn't make me want to puke. So great job.
Thank you.
Yeah. And then you had also talked about how you wanted to create something with point of view. And there's a quote that I really loved. Do you mind if I read it?
Go ahead.
Okay. I loved people who didn't deserve me, ideas that didn't serve me, places I'd come to hate when I knew all they would do is hurt me. Still, I loved. I really loved that quote, and it was very impactful, and it's stayed with me for a while now.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to hear that.
Yeah. And then you also chose to use one of my favorite poems by Mary Oliver throughout the show.
Yeah.
I don't know. One of my teachers at school brought that into one of our voice classes one day, and it's one of the things I think about when I'm making choices. What am I going to do with my one wild and precious life?
I love that. So. Yeah. And I love, I did a lot of kind of pop culture references in the piece because I wanted to invoke that kind of feeling of nostalgia or innocence. And that like pop culture is a shorthand and that everybody's popular culture is different. So there's also with Harjeet, there's like all the references to both Bollywood stars and American like brown movie stars. And that like, you know, pop culture is a broad category with lots of different possibilities within it. But yeah, I mean, my big reaction was like when they asked about Cyrano, I was like, you know, and with the idea that Cyrano would be a woman, I was like, I am not going to write another woman that hates herself. I was like, I can't put that into the world. And I felt strongly about it. And so I was like, what's my way around that? And so you know, there's kind of like 3 love stories in it, right? There's like the sort of classic love story between, you know, the Cyrano character and the Roxanne character and the Christian character. And then there's you know, it's very much about female friendships. I've always wanted to write something about female friendships because, again, you know, in our sort of patriarchal canon, and including like, you know, there's a lot of women that write like this too, that all female relationships are about jealousy and trying to take each other down, or like, oh, the older woman who's jealous of I'm like, bleh. So not the world that I live in.
Not the world I live in either.
And so I wanted to, you know, show a female friendship that was complicated and so essential and so important, and inherently dramatic as well, but not in the like sort of typical catfight kind of way. But then the ultimate love story is, you know, the Cyrano character, Isabel, and herself. And I feel like the way that I responded to COVID in this, and that it's, you know, as artists, like we don't have to write about hand sanitizer and frickin' masks, but like the deep feelings of isolation and the time spent just looking, you know, kind of raw at yourself and the inside of your own head, and the choice to return to a life that you might realize wasn't making you happy before. Like those are the real things that we're grappling with now. And so to let art respond to that, you know, like in Harjeet's storyline, he talks about his loneliness. And I think that's such a bone deep ache that lives everywhere in our society, I think, and especially in Vancouver. And with, you know, Isabel's strength to fight and to keep loving herself and to work to keep loving herself in a world where everyone's always like, you must hate yourself, you know? To try to like put those things in there and let that be the way that we make art that can be some kind of compass to help guide us through this big moment that we're all living through. And, you know, to try to do all that and also deliver like minimum like 1 chuckle per minute, you know, like, so
it's a comedy.
Absolutely. So I really hope that, you know, if it makes it on stage one day, that it's got like a great early 2000s. I actually made a Spotify playlist. You might have noticed all the episodes are named after a pop song from like, you are younger than me, my high school days. And I hope that it has like a real early 2000s banger of a soundtrack and that it's a great time in the theater.
Do you have any mentors that have really helped you?
Yeah. I mean,
in your path to writing?
I mean, I feel like one of my big mentors is Marcus Youssef. I met him when I started working at New World as an operations coordinator. And he was the artistic director and has now become like a mentor and a great friend. And I just love his rigor in terms of infusing form and content with politic and humor and just like full honesty. So I feel like his courage as an artist has always been sort of a North Star for me. And as well, you know, he won the Simonovich prize and chose me as his protege, and that kind of financial boost gave me a lot of security through a very difficult period in my life. You know, and that's like, you know, so the Simonovich prize, they choose a laureate every year and they get to choose a protege and they get $25,000. And that happened the year that my dad died. And so I was able to just like go to therapy and not think about it, and fly to his funeral and not worry about it. And just, I think about the lasting impacts that would have had without that kind of support. And just like always someone to like give a good, honest like look at my work and to push me. And now I've dramaturged some of his works too. So we have this great kind of reciprocal artistic relationship now. That's someone who means a lot to me. Yeah. And Donna Michelle St. Bernard, who we are going to speak to.
We're gonna speak and have another conversation. I'm really looking forward to it.
Absolute icon, somebody I look up to so much, somebody who to me like sets the bar for meaning and beauty in one place. Like, yeah. And the amazing thing about Canadian theater is that like everybody's right there. Like that's the other thing that's kind of bananas. Like one of my first favorite playwrights was Daniel McIver, because I saw a play of his at the Cultch when I was like 14. And now I can see he likes my Instagram posts. And I'm like, how is this possible? But that's the joy of being in the Canadian art scene, which I think has a very high number of geniuses per capita.
And I've been learning that you look up to all these fabulous artists, but also everyone is so easy to approach. Or for the most part, everyone's so approachable, and it's really wonderful to start to learn that on the early, because it's special.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, like, I just think like post a couple of my like personal things I've been through, I am like now moving into like a absolute zero tolerance policy for any bad behavior. I'm like, we don't get paid enough. There's no reason. There's no justification. I can hold space for somebody who's going through it. But like, ultimately, I want to work with people that love theater too. I want to work with people that love equity and justice and want to infuse our working spaces with that. And I want to work with people who are nice. Like, I just don't want to deal with any BS ever again.
Great. I love that for you moving forward. I feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely.
It's just so much nicer to work with nice people.
Yeah, absolutely. There's no need, because it's such a gift. It's such a freaking gift to do what we do in a very complicated world, to do something that is in a lot of ways a very simple, humble trade, rather than some kind of fancy schmancy angelic calling. And so I just want to be with people who are full of humility and love, and just want to do our best and treat each other really well.
Do you have a piece of advice that you could share? It doesn't have to be about theater, doesn't have to be about writing, but just the best piece of advice you just ever received. Something like that.
I was thinking recently that like my intuition has never failed me, but I have failed my intuition. And I think that as a young artist, I convinced myself that anybody with an opinion about me or my work was right, because I didn't think highly enough of myself to trust my intuition and to trust my self-knowledge and good intentions. And I wish that I'd spent more time getting to actually like myself, and that if I had, I would have trusted my intuition is correct instead of always looking outside myself for the answers. Build a life that you like, and build a relationship with yourself that is resilient enough to withstand whatever kind of rejection or questions you have or challenges that you have, because that will always be there. Yeah.
That's great. I love that. That's a great thing to share with everyone listening. I feel lucky to have had the opportunity to read so much of your work and appreciate it. Thank you so much, Christine, for chatting with me today.
Thanks for having me. Talk again soon.
On today's podcast, we sat down with playwright Christine Quintana and discussed her shows Espejos Clean, Someone Like You, and Good Things to Do. If you're interested in reading her work, you can find her Governor General Award-nominated show Selfie online for purchase at Playwrights Canada Press. Stage Right is brought to you by the Globe Theatre in Regina, Saskatchewan, Canada Council for the Arts, my associate producers Tanner Zare and Riley Hardwick, who wrote all of our amazing music for the show, Chris Haynes, our sound engineer, and me, your host, Sierra Haynes. If you want to keep up with our theater online, find us on Instagram at Globe Theater Live. And if you want to see what I'm up to, you can find me online at The Sinking Canoe. Thanks for listening, and please exit stage right.